Welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I am your host, Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Any ideas or opinions expressed by myself, the guest, or a caller may not necessarily reflect the same opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Enlightenment defined. It's the state of giving and receiving greater knowledge and understanding about a certain subject or situation. Evolution defined. The gradual development of something, especially from a simple to a more complex form. So what then is Enlightenment Evolution? The state of giving and receiving greater knowledge as we develop from a simple to a more complex human being, living on Earth for our soul's experience. Welcome now and join us as we explore our Enlightenment Evolution Hour together. Hey everybody, this is Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer, your host of the Enlightenment Evolution Hour from the Enlightenment Evolution Network. And we have an amazing guest. Faust Checho is here with us from Out Faust, and he's going to be chatting with us about a lot of things as usual. A lot of great stuff for him, about him, around him. Really good stuff. Thank you all in the chat who are here live. Hello, welcome. Big announcements today, and we have to do announcements before anything. Really big announcements. For both the show, the network, and the ET Whisperer. The network and the show are kind of announcements together, but let's get to it. Next week, we have the one and only Shelly on, great friend of ours, great channeler, amazing human being. We have the week after that, which will be the 2nd of November. We're almost in November. Ruben Langdon, then Daniel Scranton, Michaela Sheldon, then the Atom Twisters, been in the chat fervently for several months. You guys might not know him except for from this chat, but he's a great dude, interesting guy, lots of stuff to talk about. After that, we have, I don't know if that's true. I'm seeing a name pop up, but I don't think that's true. Oh, that's because it says... Oh, Ryder Lee, that is true. So sorry, guys. I was thinking about, I just did his show earlier, so sorry about that. He will be on, and that's Raised from Giants. After that, we go into December, and I haven't got December fully mapped out yet, but I do know on the 28th, I will be doing a simulcast, and I will be giving more information about that with the Matrix Minds. A good friend of mine, Matt, he's a great guy. He does that show. I've been a guest on it plenty of times. We're going to simulcast for the end of the year to send out our year on this show. We're going to do that, which makes my next announcement even greater. We have Enlightenment Evolution Network and all of the shows that are coming here, including Kalina's show, which will be coming, we're pretty sure, by the beginning of next year. I've got my friend... William Piper, SPG. He was a guest on Stadia Pro Gaming, now simply Pawn Gaming, because Stadia went under, unfortunately, which was a very sad day for my friend. It really was. He's got his own show coming out, and we have a few other shows that are going to be put onto our network that we'll talk about. But the bigger announcement is that the network itself is going to now be on many more platforms. We're going to be working directly with Forbidden Knowledge News as a subsidiary of theirs. And we're going to be anywhere where they are, we are going to be too, including a whole bunch of platforms, multiple platforms, and we're going to spread our wings and get out to the greater audiences. We want to make sure that we can get the show out to as many possible people. And I know YouTube's not the favorite platform for everybody. So that's huge news for the show, huge news for that. And that will be happening soon. I'm in the process of porting all the shows from the start back of my show earlier this year until now over there. And eventually the whole whole thing will be there. But yeah, it is really awesome. They're a great network, and they are amazing people. I just had Chris on my show last week, and that's kind of how the ball got rolling. So I hope you guys enjoy that. ET Whisper, big announcement. November 1st, we are having our very first course. It's going to be a 4-week course, and it's going to be a channeled course. All 4 weeks, you get a channeling, and the topic is sexuality and sexual trauma and healing sexual trauma. We're going to talk about all sorts of things on there, sexuality through multiple dimensions. We're going to talk about the use of sexuality, the bad things that humans do as a part of sexuality, the energy that they take on. It's going to be extremely powerful and extremely huge. And I'm going to play a little clip of that and just give you an introduction to that real quick. It's a very short clip, just about a minute long, a little over a minute. After that, we'll come back, tie up the announcements real quick, and we'll get our guest in here. Enjoy, guys. If you're interested in the clip, I will have the link for the place to register, and our website will be updated to reflect that too soon. So enjoy, guys.
Looking through the construct, the technical attributes of the human sexuality, the energetic mechanics of co-creation, creation, individual understanding, part of the energy fields the human collective consciousness as a singular entity into your collective consciousness. Sexuality affects all beings.
And that's something I did fail to mention. We got the early bird special 20% right now to go off on that course. I will make sure to put that link directly in there as well as in the chat at some point tonight. But we are done with announcements. Right now, we're going to bring our dear friend Faust in. And Faust is an amazing guy. Many of you might already know him from his podcast, Far Out With Faust. But he's also been an actor and a filmmaker since 2020. Has focused his talents on creating meaningful content with his show, Far Out With Faust. Longtime student of Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Stephen Greer, Neale Donald Walsch. Daily practice of meditation, energy, breath work. Changed everything for him back in 2017. Faust became very well versed in meditation and learned how to use the coherent stillness and the heart-centered energy to reach beyond the limits of the 5 senses. As he embarked on this journey, he's had plant ceremonies, meditation retreats, and he studied all sorts of practices. And he is quite versed in the channeling community. He's learned a lot from Daniel Scranton, myself, Tyler Ellison, to name a few. And he's also in love with all things ETs, EDs, expanded consciousness, disclosure, metaphysics, and the wonderfully unpredictable magic of synchronicities in the quantum realm. This guy is also a good friend, not just of myself and Kalina, but of the things we do with our own energy and time. So we're going to bring in Faust and welcome him. Hello, Faust. How are you doing, my brother?
Hello, brother. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here tonight, brother. I am very happy that we made it on to do this. I know it took me a while to get the time carved out in the last time for your episode of Out With Faust. And when we did it was magic. And I want to give people opportunity to get to know you. And one of the things I find in getting to know someone, anyone who might have bumped into your work, might have heard your story, might have heard something about your story. So what we like to do is go before the story? Like, what are the experiences in your childhood, in your young, teenage years, a young adulthood, or even as an adult,
Mhm.
that kind of opened you up to be open to all of the things that you did finally connect with and did create the opportunity for you to be who you are?
Wow. God, it's so funny how the things that we are the hardest to come to terms with end up being the things that open us up the most, right? Sometimes it's the trauma that we suffered. Um, I think for me, growing up in kind of not exactly a functional, not that I had any idea what that was growing up, but I became an actor because I loved it, and I got a lot of positive feedback doing it, but I also wanted to express myself emotionally. I know that now. Part of what I was doing was making myself seen and heard, and stepping into these roles. At least that was part of what I was doing. And so, God, fast forward. I'm in doing a Eugene O'Neill. I come from the stage. I ended up making a lot of films and doing some TV and commercials, but stage is kind of where my heart was. And I was cast as this drunken Irish guy who has a million broken hearts. Um, and this was probably I was probably right around 27 years old, 28 years old. I had already got a master's in acting, and I was trying to play this role, and I couldn't get near it. I couldn't. It was so deep, and this guy's heartbreak was so profound, and part of me knew that something was going on because as soon as I felt vulnerable, it was almost like Iron Man put the armor. Iron Man just can think it, and then the nanobites respond, and all of a sudden the armor is up. It's like without a thought. That that physiological response to vulnerability was highly ingrained. It was like this conditioning in me, which I hated. I didn't have to think about it. The moment I felt vulnerable, it would it would it was gone. It was like this fleeting thing, and part of me was like, "No, don't go," but the other part didn't. It was really kind of conditioned into me. And thankfully, I had an acting coach who, he was like, "Do you want to play these roles?" And I said, I think my answer was something dramatic, like, if I can't play these roles, and I don't know what I want to do. And he was like, "Then you need to find out why you built," I think he said, "the Empire State Building over your emotional center."
Oh,
And I was like, "Yes, yeah, I guess I do." And that kind of sent me soul searching because I knew I had a problem, but I was one of those, it's the whole parental paradox. You don't know what you don't know. You kind of know your family's culture, and a lot of people, aren't faced with a reference point until they end up in a relationship. Sometimes that's when it's too late, but all of a sudden you start to see how other families operate, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, you your dad didn't take his belt off and beat the shit out of you when you were bad. Because I was told that was run of the mill. Okay. um, that kind of was what was going on. And so I started to get some help and figure out what was going on. And it was a lot of conditioning from my childhood, a lot of you know um I mean, I guess the therapist told me it was abuse. I was like, really? She looked at me like I was like, is he being serious? I'm like, you don't know what you don't know. So I was on a quest to open my heart, right? Literally, I wanted to be able to open my heart. And I thought I was doing this to become a better actor. and and I know now that I was doing it to become a better human being, a better father, a better husband, a better friend, just better for this planet, but that, I started to seek out ways to do that, and of course, when you start down this path, then synchronicities really start to show up. And I found she was a core therapist, and she introduced me to meditation and Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And then I met this other wonderful woman who was like, you need to read and learn who Drumvalo Melchizedek was and take his workshop. It's a heart opening workshop. And this woman was psychic. I never met her before. I'm sitting across from her. She's like, and they told me that they were like, she gets downloads about people. I'm like, okay. I'm sitting there and we're all having dinner. I'm sitting across from her. She's like, in the middle of everything, she just turns to me. We haven't spoken a word to each other. And she goes, can I tell you something? And I said, yeah. She said, it's personal. I was like, okay. And she's like, I can see how big your heart is. She said, and I can see how wounded it is. And she said, I want to tell you where to go to help. And she told me all about this workshop, and it was you've heard of Drumvalo because he's an OG in the spiritual community.
Yes, I've heard of him many times. I'm slightly aware of some of the work, but yeah.
Yeah. And I just started to really kind of follow that path of healing, which led me down all these amazing roads, and I found all these incredible people. But that was kind of a defining moment when I realized that I needed to find out why I had this kind of physiological response to feeling vulnerable, feeling love, and being able to express that. That was kind of a turning point. And then from there, it was, it wasn't a short road, but it was so worth it, because I can sit here and talk to you and feel what I'm feeling. You're inevitably keeping yourself from parts of, your joy, the whole spectrum. If you're cut off from some of it, you're cut off from the other side of it, right? That's what I realized. And joy and love, the profound love, I never felt those things like I did as I healed myself and, was able to feel the pain I needed to feel and open my heart, right? So it was so worth it to get over all the trauma.
That's amazing. And something you said really stuck out there. You don't know unless you know. And we look back at all the things in our lives that we have gone through that are just absolutely insane. And we accepted it at the moment as normal, part of the course, regular family life. I look back at my childhood, I see some of that, but I also look at my first marriage with my son's mom and the lifestyle I lived back there when I was on drugs and stuff. And there was a lot of things that I did and was around that was like literally insane, that I was just like, yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Why do you think we do that as humans? We condition ourselves to just live in shit sometimes.
It's like, like you just said, you don't know what you don't know.
You said that, but
yeah, that's right. I did say that. But I don't think it's it's not conscious, and it's part of kind of, I think that the same way we choose we come into this life and we have our soul family, and it's like we kind of have an idea what we're getting into. And of course there's all these, we have free will and there's all these paths to take, but it just kind of takes sometimes one choice that leads to that right path, right? And then all of a sudden the amount of turns that you can take, well, there's still a lot of them, they're all leading towards a better direction for your life. So I think that it's all, if I didn't experience that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I would probably be like, I don't know, miserably like reading over a screenplay. and wondering why in God's name I agreed to work on this movie. I don't know, something like that. But I think it's all part of the journey.
Absolutely. It's amazing too. And first of all, I want to say thank goodness for all the psychics without that have boundary issues with people who just get it. At least she asked you. A lot of psychics are like, "Hey, I want to tell you something, this and this and that." But no, just kidding aside. The energy behind acting, was this something that you found a great passion in, besides the fact that you had this wounded heart? Did it stimulate other parts of you that made it worthwhile, or was it just
Oh,
something?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I was so I it the moment I started doing it, people were like, "You're really good at this," and I was like, "Really? I don't, because you don't really, if you just, you're kind of operating on imagination and instinct, and you don't really have any technique when you start. You're just, and I just kind of, it gave me an opportunity to do what I kind of always was doing in my head anyway, and just play. And I got a lot of positive feedback right away, and I had never experienced, anything quite like that. And so I just, I started auditioning, and as soon as I started auditioning, I started getting roles. And people were like, I would cast you in this bigger role, but you just don't have a lot of experience, but you should, keep doing this. And I'm like, all right, but I enjoyed it. I love making people laugh. It's one of my favorite things to do. So that, those parts I would fall right into. I was always a clown anyway. So, I mean, in class and in school, I was always in trouble for clowning around and not paying attention, but there wasn't much to pay attention to.
And that's the truth.
So I got good at being a clown, I guess.
Well, I see you still have your sense of humor intact when I watch you on your social media and you're sharing serious topics. I see that you still got that. That's something I try to dive in as much as I can too when I
Yeah.
can. So that's great. But the energy behind acting for me is very similar to the imaginative, manifestational part of the beginning processes of channeling, when people
Hmm.
have to work with the flow of getting into another energy set. Have you done acting since the heart opening part? I mean, have you
Oh yeah.
continued that?
Yeah. And it was kind of, it was amazing the way it culminated. And I was playing, God, I play, it was from, I want to say, I almost said Midsummer's Night Dream, but it wasn't. It was All's Well That Ends Well. I think it's like one of the most famous love scenes between Rosalind and my wife played opposite me, and I knew I was going to go in front of the teacher who, I think like 8 years earlier had told me what I needed to do, and this guy is just head over heels, and I came out and you know I I just I was able to just be totally in that space. And my teacher, of course, was just like, Faust, you're right on it. You're right on it. Stay with it. He was working with my wife, and he would. So, it was. I was firing on all cylinders, and um, it was amazing to feel and to do that. To be able to do that. It was so much fun. To not have to worry or struggle, but just it's like we were talking before, and I use that, what is it, an analogy? Well, like herding cats. Trying to force an emotion in acting is
Yeah.
like herding cats. It's not going to happen. You have to be able to allow, and surrender to an emotion in acting that you've set up for yourself. So God, it was great to do that. And I look, I'll act again. I mean, I've become an audiobook narrator for my son, who's dyslexic. So I kind of am playing with dialects and acting every night anyway.
Oh,
But
nice.
I'll certainly do it again, especially in the theater. And I'm sure that I'm still in touch with a few producers who are like, "We're going to make this film, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's see what happens." you know, um, but yeah, I mean, I don't miss it necessarily because I do a lot of it in my in my life anyway. So that kind of creative fix comes to me anyway. But I'm sure I'll do it again, better than ever.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing too. Being open for it too now that you understand the nature of how energy flows, and I wanted to ask you, did you ever take that role with the Broken Million
Oh,
Hearts?
you're reading my mind. So I was waiting for, there's been like, so my acting coach is this incredible man. His name is Larry Moss. Most people in the acting community have heard of him. A lot of the actors, when they win their academies, they thank him. He's Leonardo DiCaprio's coach. He's worked with Jake Gyllenhaal. He's worked with, like, he's an amazing, humble. He's like the Yoda. Kind of has the opposite body type too. He's like super tall and lanky, but he's like the Yoda of acting. He can see right through. He's been through it all. He can see right through it all. He sees kind of exactly what the actor's struggling with, and it's normally themselves. He sees the trauma and he helps people to free themselves from it, or at least find the help they need to free themselves. That's his gift, and he's so passionate about his work. But incredible human being. He always has these workshops where you come and you work on a play, and then you'll work on a scene for him. That's where I was doing this play, and he hasn't done it since the pandemic. He has not had a live class, but I have been dreaming about bringing this scene back to him. The good news is it's a role that you could play it anywhere from the age of 20 to kind of 45, and I don't look as old as I am anyway. Like Liam Neeson played it on Broadway he ended up marrying the woman he played opposite, and what's her name, Natalie Richards, or she's the one who died in that ski accident. It was crazy.
Oh yeah.
But they fell in love doing this role on Broadway together, and he was already in his late 40s when he was playing this role. So I have time. I can return to it one of these days.
Yeah, I think with a mastery over yourself, comparative to where you were, it would be a natural fit, because you learned how to get over that too. So you can tap into that energy in a huge way.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing, brother. Well, thank you for sharing that with us too. And so take us from where you're acting and you're working in all of these different acting modalities. Take us to how that gets you here to where you are now,
Okay.
to the Far Out with Faust guy, to the guy who I met through Ruben, which is very interactive with this community, and ED with the show and everything. How are you there from here, or
Okay.
vice versa? You're from there.
Let me try and track this interstellar orbit here. So I don't know. I think I'm trying to remember what came first. Because I'm pretty sure. Obviously, like, so, like, just like I mentioned to you, and I think you said it in the bio you read. Meditation really kind of opened me up to what was out there, and the more I could heal those lower chakras that were storing all that trauma, the more grounded I got. The more I was able to open up and out, of course, and it goes up through the heart, and then all of a sudden you're connected in a way you never imagined you could be, and so I think that you know I'm just trying to remember who came first. If I was reading Neale Donald Walsch, and he wrote a book called Conversations with God, which is channeled material. It's a dialogue he had with what he believed to be God. Certainly a very a very godlike entity. um, Wonderful text, wonderful dialogue. I can't recommend it enough. Kind of all the questions you have for God are answered in a hilarious and profound way. If you haven't ever checked out the book, God, I love giving that book out. So I don't know if I'm trying to think if that came first, and then I was like, oh my God, channeled material, and then I think then I found Abraham, and then I found Seth, then I found well, I should say Esther and Jane, and then I found Bashar, and then I found Reuben, and then I found you and Michaela, and I just could not get enough. And I just started devouring all Bashar's videos. And when I found you guys through Reuben's show, um, it's I felt compelled to connect in this way, and to learn techniques to do that. And so I was practicing all the time, and I was working. I would work one-on-one with Tyler a lot, and it got to the point where Tyler's like, "You can, you can do this, right?" Like I work with a lot of people, and not many people bring forth information the way you do. And I was channeling from a meditation group, and it was very, or I should say, it was very Arcturian. It was that was the energy I was connecting with, and that's the energy I feel very connected with through my higher selves. And my meditation group was like, come on, are you gonna? I was like, okay, I was doing it, and my wife was kind enough to she would come in. I'd make her come in all the time, and so I could practice, uh and and then it's not that I decided not to. It just, the pandemic happened. I was working with this awesome guy on his screenplay at the time, which is all about consciousness. And he was like, he's a very spiritual dude. He hangs out with Drimbalo. And he was like, we got to start a podcast. And I'm like, all right. I mean, okay, that sounds cool. He's like, no, you're going to host it. I'm like, I am. He was like, yeah, you're perfect. And I'm like, all right. He was like, I'll call your buddy Bashar. I was like, no way, really? I was like, all right, I'll do it. I want to talk to Daryl. Yeah. He knew just what buttons to press. So that's kind of how, I ended up here. I went from kind of, really kind of coming into a solid practice and deciding whether I wanted, continue to pursue that. But it just ended up becoming this podcast. And I really like to think that, all the practice I did was to, really solidify my connection, with that part of myself, so that I could bring it into my show and my voice in my show, and speak from my heart, to people, and remember what's important to be talking about. And like dude, like the fact that you have your channeling classes online for free, those were such a wealth. Like I would just go back to them too. They were so great. It's so cool that you have that for people who want to learn. I was always so grateful for that.
Yeah, my own personal philosophy has always been that everyone can channel, and that everyone should if they're excited to do that. And if
Mhm.
they are, that's kind of the way I perceive the future going out. A lot of people say, well, being a channeler, doesn't that defeat, the interest of you doing channeling as a living? And I'm like, how could it?
Yeah.
People.
Yeah.
eh, I actually, it's funny. Me and Kalina were talking about this. I've actually done sessions for other channelers before. A lot of channelers have come to me to do sessions before. And it's
Mhm.
not because they can't channel. It's because they want a different perspective from the beings or consciousness or energy that they channel to see how it rubs against
Mhm.
their own, or to see how it affects their own, or whatever the case is. So it's not like I'm going to stop channeling. And even if I did
Right.
professionally, I'm still going. It's a huge part of my life. I'm not just gonna quit doing that. So it's very much something that I believe in, that everyone should be able to have access to
Yeah.
themselves, and you can't get there without really allowing yourself. And that really is all that I teach in how to channel is
Mhm.
self-trust, recognition of receiving, uh, and that's kind of the
Mhm. It
majority of it,
is,
really.
but it's a big thing. It's hard that ends up being the hardest part for people because, all of a sudden they do find themselves in a state, but then you have to get over the self-doubt. You have to trust what's coming and allow. It's almost like, people who are learning to sing, they don't want people to hear them.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta let it out. The only way you're gonna get better is to let it out, right? And that's the whole practice is to get over the self-doubt and trust what's coming out.
Oh yeah, and I love that analogy, the singing. You don't want other people to hear you. It really is the biggest hurdle that I've seen in other people is getting past that part where they're saying, is this from my imagination? Is it from a bad
Mhm.
entity? Is it from, do I have multiple personalities, or what's going on here?
Yeah.
And my biggest answer always is it doesn't matter. If it's helping you in your life, if it's helping you find answers, just let it ride. And like you
Yeah.
said, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that too. I appreciate the compliment, brother.
You're welcome.
I really do. Um, so taking all of these teachings through channeling, and I'm glad you said Seth and Jane Roberts, because after you said Donald Walsh and Esther Hicks, I was going to be like, hey, have you rubbed through any Seth? Because I always
Oh, yeah.
see how many people have connected with that. But uh, so after you've read this, after you've kind of integrated, after you started working on your own, helping other people with it, doing this podcast, I mean, uh, what do you say your biggest takeaway has been from channel material in general?
Well, first, growing up Catholic, um, you know, and kind of being indoctrinated with a lot of guilt and shame about just about everything. I mean, there's very few things that you were not supposed to feel bad about being and doing when you're kind of in that environment. And I was, kind of forced into Catholic school my whole life, and I never quite understood it. But kind of like when I read Conversations with God, I understood. It resonated so profoundly with me, and I remember crying reading it because it was to to come to the realization that, of course, you know, just as my son could never do anything to me that would make me not love him, let alone banish him to some fiery, um, quote, location for screwing up, for all eternity. It was like, I just there was no face palm that could do justice to the amount of, like, duh, that had come over me. I was so relieved because, and then it was so obvious, like, of course, eh, God has created life in his image, and there's no, free will is our greatest gift. And to say that then that person is going to be, put into a torturous fiery prison for the rest of existence for merely using the free will that we're told God gave us, that is kind of hypocritical craziness. That's not what kind of a God would do that.
That's a
That's,
sadistic parent type shit.
I mean, like, that is such fear-based, craziness. And I mean no offense to people who, you know, still have that belief. I respect people who have religion. I don't. It's hard for me now to fathom, uh, a creator that could do something like that to its creations. And so I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone who has, and has made religion be a positive thing in their life. I know people who do it, who have done it, and it's amazing when it happens.
Yeah.
I'm just not participating in that way anymore. I still obviously believe and love God, but it's just not in that religious kind of way, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's my whole family's still very much Christian. They don't go to church every week or anything like that. They use the aspects of the Bible and Christ teachings that tell them to be better people, and they live through that,
yeah,
and they do it, and that makes them better people. But the opposite side of that are the people who will come up to you and say, "Hey, you're going to hell. You're a
yeah,
piece of human garbage because you don't believe what I believe." That's the other thing, and there are both kinds out in this
yeah.
world. And fortunately for me, I came from a family who, even though they still hold the beliefs, kind of hold a better one. I posted a couple weeks ago a passage from the Bible. I knew it probably wouldn't
Oh
be
boy,
well
yeah.
liked by my by my family, but it was about God's prophet was going to teach, and two kids came out of the woods mocking him and calling him bald,
Mm,
and he sicked two bears to maul and kill 47 children. Then the guy asked God to bring down these bears and kill 47 children. So God allowed 42 children to be mauled by bears to death for making fun of a guy's hair. And
mm,
that's the power. This is the thing I know about being a Christian as a child. I was the one in Bible school asking these questions because I
yeah,
read the Bible. I read it all the time. I was interested to know why my parents had such great faith in this thing,
yeah,
and I picked it apart, and God, I was hated for that.
yeah.
I was
They don't
kicked
like when
out
you
of
do that. They
classes.
don't like
Yeah, no.
you ask too many questions.
Yeah, but you're right, though. I think it's good for people who can use it constructively.
Sure.
But for you, it's a realization that it
Yeah. So that was
non-loving. Yeah.
the first kind of experience I had was like, oh my God, it was just beautiful to feel that kind of love and relief and when you know something, when you have that intuitive download, it goes right into your heart and it comes packaged, right? Like it's all there. And I knew it in that moment, that all that stuff that I was taught, that it couldn't be true. Um, not for me, not anymore. And it was such a relief to now live in a world where I wasn't worried about, fire and brimstone. Not that I was, literally taking, the Bible and all, but you're raised to believe something, and it's kind of there. It just kind of sticks around, and it's not always easy to just excise it, but I was able to in that moment, and it was, that I had goosebumps all over my body, and I was just crying, and it was just because it was so true. It just struck me as so true, and I couldn't. Then it was hard to remember how only yesterday I believed this other thing. Something like that happens. It's such a paradigm shift. It's powerful, but then like learning, like reading about Esther Hicks and the story. Talk about having a lot of courage and continuing to practice. If you ever, and I'm sure you have, when I'm sorry, I said Esther, I meant Jane Roberts. When Jane started to, they used an Ouija board. Of course, this was before Hollywood kind of took the Ouija board and turned it into the gateway for the devil. But they were using an Ouija board, and then this entity came through. I don't know if you remember that story that she
Oh yeah.
tells. And that would have scared the bejesus out of most people, but they were like, "This is great. We're going back." They were like, "Get back at it the next week or whatever." They just kept practicing, and my God, all the material that came from Jane and Seth is just, I mean, talk about mind blowing. That'll make you think. You can always go back to the Seth material, and it's always different too.
Yeah, I've said that a lot of times in this podcast, but also throughout my channelings. Anytime Seth gets brought up, I say, I listen to the audio books on Seth
Mhm.
probably once every 2, 2.5 years. Every time I listen, every time I read, I get something new from it, because the materials remains the same, but it's encoded at multiple levels, and I have shifted, so my perspective is going to shift. So beautiful material. I think the feeling you have towards the Donald Walsch material, I have for the Seth material, and it's because it's the first channeling I found after I met Treb that reconfirmed that I didn't have a brain tumor, that it might actually be some real entity talking to me.
Yeah. I
It was,
never forget that story, man. It's one of my favorite stories.
yeah, it was powerful. So now you're on this journey, and you've had so much synchronicity and so many things that kind of helped you to get to this place, and this beautiful experience comes up. How has your journey been? What have you found yourself excited about as you're doing this show? Like what topics keep popping up that you really love, or what experiences are you having through doing that really hold into your heart?
Um, it's so cool to track kind of the ebb and flow of what is being brought into my awareness, and whatever it is usually it just keeps showing up. Like, so I just finished a recording a podcast, not today, but yeah, like 2 days ago, with David Icke, who is pretty, he's gotten pretty kind of internationally recognized for some of the things he's said and done.
Oh, that's a huge show. That's a
Y-
huge accomplishment to get him on your show.
Yeah, and his books are incredible, particularly the one that no one would publish. It's
Oh
called
yeah.
And the Truth Shall Set You Free. And the reason why they wouldn't publish it is because, talk about channel material. Like I'm reading this book and I'm like, how did this guy, how did he come to so much information? Because he writes all these things in, and he's like, if you look at the minutes of this meeting, the documents show that this is what was, and I'm like, holy, how do you find minutes from a meeting from 1910? How do you know where to look? Um, and he was explaining it to me. He was telling me how, because he had like this Kundalini awakening experience, and in it they told him that, like, it was a psychic who was speaking for them, and she said that you're going to be led to material, and material is going to be put right into your head, and you're going to have a lot of secrets that are going to be coming through you to share. And he was like, this was the first time anything like this had happened to him, and of course he was like, all right, well, I'm out of here. He was like, well, I had no idea what's going on, but he said everything from that day kind of changed. And he just speaks about this, at first he would be led to the knowledge, and he was pointing to his head. He said, then after about 2-3 years, what happened was I would just know something. It would just come to me, and it would come in through my heart. And then I would be led to with all the proof I needed for what I had been given, like the knowledge that was put there. And I was like, well, that explains how you managed to, because I don't know how someone puts together such a detailed, I mean, if you want to understand the power structure of the planet right now, and where it started, how it started, and who's in charge of it, pick up this book, And the Truth Shall Set You Free, it's called. He has one other one, but it's not quite as meticulous and documented, like just about the centralization of power and how it began hundreds of years ago with some of these families, and how they did it, and how they're continuing to do it. And but he what I started to say was, David talks about how this world has been conditioned to believe it is its five senses, and that everything that the school system, the medical system, the science system, it's all been co-opted by these same people who understand that if people are not connecting with the greater source, with up and out, right, that they will be convinced that they are this body, they are these five senses, and that's it. And those people will never realize, what they're missing. I tell my son all the time about the elephants in India, and what they used to do was they would put a rope on their leg from the time they're babies, and they would never take that rope off. And as the elephant grew, they would just make the rope a little bigger, but they never took it off. And it got to the point where these full-grown elephants, they never tried to escape. They never imagined they could. They never realized they were being held captive. And
Oh man.
and that's how they kept these elephants, because there was a lot of elephants in India at one point, and they were kind of a status symbol. And I was like, that's what's happening in the world. I tell my 11-year-old, with the way that things are set up. And so and then I'm listening to this guy. He wrote a book called Forbidden Archaeology, and I'm gonna have a podcast with him tomorrow. And people are asking him, they're like, you found like 4 million-year-old human bones, and that, over and over he's documented all these finds, but the academic scientific structure won't allow him to. They won't recognize what his life's work has shown, that we've been around a lot longer. And when people ask him why, he has the same answer as Ike. He's saying the same thing. He was like, because this world, they don't, because if they were to acknowledge this, they would have to begin to acknowledge consciousness. Now, this is an archaeologist talking, and I'm like, damn, he's saying the same thing that David Icke is saying, that we're in a world that there is very much, all the signposts point towards, you are your five senses. There's nothing else to this world. It's material. You're a consumer. Eat, go to work, go to bed, get up, do it again, and pay your taxes. That's kind of the conditioning that a lot of humans are getting every day. And he was like, so if they were to acknowledge my work, they would have to acknowledge some of these other things, and they're not prepared to do that. And I was like, man, it's crazy that he's saying the same thing that David Icke was just saying. And I'm going to ask him more about it tomorrow, but I was, doing my homework on him, and I'm like, that's so crazy that these two men are echoing each other, and they're not remotely the same. So I get excited when things like that happen, because I feel like I'm contributing to the consciousness of the planet with the conversations I'm having. And there, I know how interconnected we are, and I know that when and as well as you do, when you speak, those words don't just then those words go up and out into the ether, if you will. They connect with people, and sometimes they're heard today, sometimes they're heard tomorrow, but I think that's how you change the world. You put things into the collective consciousness of humanity, so that the 100th monkey effect becomes inevitable, right? About the 100th monkey effect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the Maharishi effect is the other side of that. The more people become conscious, the more that affects the state. And then the way I think of it is like, eventually we're gonna create a world where some of these families, and now they're the corporate conglomerate billionaire strongholds that are kind of hoarding technology and doing some things that are keeping everyone who they've dehumanized in a lot of ways, keeping them in a place that they don't need to be anymore. I feel like if we create a world where those people look out and see what's happening, they won't be able to see the world the way they have been anymore, even with their level of indoctrination. It'll just have to change. And that's why I love doing what I'm doing, and I believe in it.
Well, yeah, and you brought up something I had just talked recently about too, the 100th monkey effect. is a part of this collective's understanding of how we share without sharing, and just the energy of an existing expression sticks with that collective energy. And we're talking actually about people's legacy. We're speaking about the history, and how now we fear the pits of hell and the fire and the damnation, versus back then what you feared the most when you were a Greek getting ready to go fight Rome, or
Mhm.
whether you were before this, it was a fear that you would not live eternally, because the only way to live eternally was to leave a legacy.
Mm.
And this energy that you're putting in the collective, as well as your family, as well as your deeds, that's a legacy. And all of the, speaking to these two guys, as far apart as they are, speaking of the same things, you're going to leave your legacy with them too, because the questions that you ask have to be able to be processed by them, which can
Mhm.
help them shift in the way that they see it. It's happened to me every time I speak to someone. I ask a question that gets an answer that makes me see something a little differently. And I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. And
Mhm.
I do want to mention part of your legacy too, as being a family person. I normally don't read out comments in the chat during the show until question time, if we get to a question time. But Kalina did say, Faust, side note, you're a really great dad. Like
Oh,
Rob, your
thank you.
kiddos are truly blessed. So I wanted to
Thank
share that with you as part of your legacy here.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, it's you know, so well, let's go to that for a little bit. How is learning these things from your podcast, from your experience, synchronicity, your heart opening, your acting, how does that affect you as a family person? You said that one of your main things when
Yeah.
you were dealing with that was to be a better person, and a dad as a side effect unknown to you. How
Yeah.
does that, how has the rest of it since then affected you?
So God, I feel like I got my stuff together just in time for my firstborn. His name's Luciano. He's a little bringer of light. He's he's an amazing little boy, and he has such an appetite for metaphysics. I mean, he always has. It's crazy. He has such an ear for it. He perks right up when I'm talking to him. My wife will come in, and I'm just, I'm like, I'm telling him about, you know, archangels, and he's just lit up like a Christmas tree, and um, he loves it. It's affected everything, I think, in a profound way. Um, I feel like I feel like I was meant to take the path that I did for him. He's a very sensitive boy. Like I used to catch him crying in his bed at night, and I'd be like, "What are you thinking about? What are you upset about?" And his mind would just, he would hear something like, I think one day in school they said something about slavery. He couldn't compute, he couldn't process how that could happen. He learned about the deaths that happened in World War II. Somebody said something in one of his classes, and he was at home, and I would catch him under the covers crying, and um it allowed me to help him, um understand that there is no end to it, that death is just another birth, and that, yeah, these human beings are, we make a mess of things sometimes right now, but we're very young. We're a young species, and just like a young child who's figuring out how to do things, we they make a mess, and so is it the child's fault? No, the child is learning and growing. And the good news is, you know, especially for humans, is we're being given opportunity after opportunity to get it right. And yeah, it seems to us like it's a slow road, but we are a young species, and as well as I do, compared to a lot of other races and beings and civilizations, we're a very young species, and we've come a long way in a short time. And sometimes you see this happen with kids. It's like, man, this kid's as big as a linebacker, but he's 4 years old. He's kind of wrecking the place, and that happens sometimes. But you gotta love and nurture that child the same way you would any other child, so that he starts to come into an awareness where he can keep himself and others safe. And I
That's
just kind of, I explain that comforted my son in a way that I don't know if I would have been able to explain had I not taken this path, that I have. And he was, all of a sudden he opens his eyes and he looks at me, and he gets it. He nods his head. It resonates with him. He's not like, "You're crazy, Dad." He has said to me, "That sounds far-fetched." I was like, "It's not." Oh man.
I
But
love children that way too, the openness of them, and
yeah.
it's very amazing with a sensitivity level that you have that capacity to nurture them. Men that are between my age and yours come from the boomer parents
Mhm.
and the silent generation parents, and they were hardcore people.
Mhm.
You don't show your emotion, you don't talk about your emotion as a man. You buckle down, put your head down, you shut your mouth, and you get to it. And
Walk it off.
yep, walk it out. Exactly. So to know that people like us can explore the aspects of openly sharing and talking about the depths of emotion, I think is a testament to itself of how far
Mhm.
as a race we've come in general, but it also reflects on the younger generation. A lot of
Mhm.
people make fun of how soft the kids are these days. A lot of people, especially in Generation X, are like, "Oh, these millennials and Gen Z kids are just so weak." And all. I'm like, you know what? They're also caring and they're also
Mhm.
sweet, and they also know from day one that bullying isn't good. And I
Yeah.
said, this if we would have had that, we would have been way further ahead.
Yeah.
And I know they're in this place of growing that's really odd and awkward for them. Like a lot of kids don't want to drive, and a lot of kids don't
Yeah.
want to have kids. And I read a post today from a Facebook friend that was kind of heartbreaking. He had a young kid in his 20s who came to him and said, "I can't bring a child in this world." And he's in
Mm.
love with this woman, and he's like, what that's like, Dad, to love this person so much. That's probably your greatest moment in your life. And he said, "No, son, when you came here was great." And it was just
Right.
so heartbreaking. And it's not uncommon. It's very common along millennials and Gen Z that they just don't want children.
Yeah.
So there is some awkwardness in this pathway of growing, but God, how much of that trauma do they have to transmute for the rest of us to be able to get to where they're at, to be sensitive and to be open to hearing new things?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, there, there's there's a the what's rampant, especially with some of the young people, is that they're very susceptible to some of the programming that has been put in place about the scarcity, the lack mindset, and this notion that there's not going to be enough, and this planet is going to, it's not going to be able to sustain. And that's, that is part of the Darwinism, that has been kind of foisted onto the world to justify, in my opinion, shitty behavior, like bad behavior towards humans. If it's a dog eat dog world, okay, first of all, that's a corporate MO. That's what they live by. Profits rule, and however we have to get them, just so that's going to be acceptable. In fact, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you don't have to worry about it. You can kill as many people as you want. I mean, you'll just have to pay for it at the end. So that'll be $4 billion. There's your fine. No, you don't have to do time. Anyone else who kills people would have to do time. And
Mm.
if you're Alex Jones, you don't have to do anything of the sort. You could just make a mistake and you have to pay. I mean, I don't know if anybody can pay that amount of money, but I don't remember any other human being on the planet making a mistake and having to pay almost $1 billion for that mistake. I sort of remember a lot of politicians saying some things that cost millions of people their lives that they knew were lies, but they don't have to pay. They're not liable for their mistakes, right?
Well, how many wars have those same people sent us into under
That's
false
right.
pretenses where tens of thousands of young children, like 18, 20-year-old children died?
That's right.
And then, oops, my bad, there wasn't any massive
Yeah, as
weapon
if
of
they didn't know
destruction.
that.
Yeah. And yeah, it's always going to be that way as long as there are figureheads of power that we give our power away to.
Yeah.
And me and Kalina were actually talking about this today, with the dogma also that gets pushed on the younger generations about these things, like, there's not enough, that the world will be flooded and half of us will die anyway in 10 years. This fear tactic, because they're so gentle and because they're so sensitive, it's heartbreaking to see
It is.
them pushing these kids into a fearful corner.
It's really, and they're susceptible to it for a lot of reasons, not least of which is how attached they are to technology. And it's coming out more and more now. The more time that these kids spend, and it's a problem. I joke around and say, part of being a parent these days is just mitigating bad habits, not so much bad behavior, but just the technology is so set up to be addicting, and you really kind of have to govern it, because it's you see, I mean, I don't see it as much anymore because I don't live in the city anymore, but you walk down a street in New York and the parents are having dinner, and the infant and the toddler both have the iPad propped up in front of their faces. And I'm just like, what are you doing? I just want to be like, what are you doing? And look, I know sometimes, there's emergency mode when mom and dad need a mental health break. I understand that. I've done that, but I mean, it should not be the go-to. And there's a lot of processing issues that happen. It's just not good for the kids,
Yeah.
for their little brains. And then what happens is the pleasure centers get set on this, astronomical level. And those kids, they're not going to, they don't, even TV becomes a bore. They just want that game. They want that screen,
Yes.
it's not healthy.
Absolutely. We found that out through our raising with Lilith. She had some surgeries when she was young, 2 surgeries before she was 2 for her Vader's association. And the only way we could change her diaper, because one of her surgeries was down in the area, was to get her mind off of the pain and to distract her. She was still young, like one in a couple months. So we gave her this tablet, and now that's a problem. And now if she doesn't have it in certain times, she gets upset. So even something just as simple as cartoons, something that we grew up with, it definitely is an effect, and absolutely. And I do want to say, I'm reading through the comments, the chat, as I often try to do as we're doing this, and I just want to make sure people understand too, when I'm talking about some of these things with millennials and Gen Zs, it's definitely not an insult. I love the generation. I love the fact that it's going into a more gentle and receptive way. But I just think, and obviously, we're not talking about everybody within that area too, because I met a lot of millennials and Gen Zs that I thought were Gen X's until I saw their age. You know what I mean? It's like you could tell your parents rubbed off on you because that energy is there. But it's just I worry about people our age being manipulated by the boomer generation, as they see as really tough and great, and it's just a generational thing. Every generation has its problems with the previous and the next generation, and all of them have a good things with both the previous and next. So,
and there's a balancing out that happens, and I think it's always looking for equilibrium. And so right now, maybe the kids are a little more sensitive, but you know what, the bullying has gone way down. Like there's a lot of pluses that have come from these kids being a little more sensitive. And I think most of them are very positive. So they're not quite as physical, but that will balance itself out, and as these things do. I just also want to say, I'm not defending what Alex Jones did. I'm just saying he has a right to make a mistake, and it shouldn't cost him $1 billion. What he said and what he did, it was atrocious, but I believe it was a mistake. I don't believe he maliciously tried to, make the parents feel. I don't know how he could feel worse than they did for what happened, but it was a terrible mistake that he made, which he apologized a lot for. And I'm not trying to defend him. I'm just saying you have to realize that he's being attacked for a reason, and it's not it's not because of what he said about Sandy Hook or the parents. That's all I'm trying to say. Anybody who's listening, I didn't. People are still very emotional about Alex Jones, and some people who, they notice what's going on with some other things, but they think, well, he got off easy. I'm like, got off easy? The dude has to pay $900 million. That's a lot of money for a mistake. Did he kill anyone? I don't think so.
I thought that the biggest settlement ever was against the pharmaceutical company for $4 billion. So he's, as a personal private individual, has to pay a quarter of what a multi-mega billion-dollar corporation.
That's funny because just a few months ago, maybe it was a little longer, but the Purdue family, the ones that knowingly marketed OxyContin, a very highly addictive and destructive painkiller, they were caught, knowing full well how addictive, getting their products through the tests without acknowledging that addictive quality, and destroying millions of lives and killing a lot of people. But the judge said that actually the Purdue family themselves, they're not liable. The company's liable. Company's bankrupt conveniently, but the Purdue's, who are multi-billionaires, they've been around. They're a staple of American name and corporate families here. They're not responsible. They can't, even though they were running the company and deliberately making decisions that harmed and killed over 1 million people, destroyed lives, created addicts. They're not responsible. They don't have to pay a dime personally. Alex Jones, who made a mistake, he has to pay $1 billion because he made a mistake. Now, he's personally liable. Yeah, that's the world that we live in. I have a problem with that.
Well, yeah, it's and this is the thing too with Alex Jones. I've seen some things that he said that I thought were way crazy, and later down the road it got shown that they had some validity. And I also thought, well, maybe that's plausible, and it turned out to be BS. So Alex Jones, as a news deliverer, I could take him or leave him.
Yeah.
But my problem is any human who's sharing their perspectives in the United States, who's guaranteed a constitutional right to speak their piece.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that shouldn't be stepped on. And I know with the Sandy Hook thing, a lot of people say, well, he did hurt people, and you can't do that with free speech. You can't directly, maliciously. That might be the case, but as you said, close to $1 billion. Is that the same? Yeah, I don't know, and maybe my opinion is not the best one to do it, because I'm always pro free will, even if that free will takes you into dark places. Look at the OxyContin thing. That was one of my things. That's one of the things in my life that damaged my family, my persons for a decade, but also brought me to the greatest part of my life ever. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So it's a crazy thing. And I understand too completely why people don't like him, or why people think that some of the things he says is dangerous. But I also understand a lot of things he said that have been accused of being dangerous in my mind are far from being that too.
Right.
And
a lot of inconvenient truths he's spoken about, which is another reason why he's highly targeted and disliked. What's her name said, the best thing that could happen is InfoWars goes off the air. I was like, yeah, because you work for the White House, and he's a nightmare for the White House. He's always talking about what you guys are actually doing. I was like, duh.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's my problem with the last 3 or 4 years hasn't been any one thing specifically, like all the topics that were hot and that people thought about. I really didn't care about them, mask, vaccine, whatever you want to
Yeah.
do, you do it. But my problem was, if you don't agree with us, we will shut you down completely.
Hmm.
And that was problematic for me because I don't think voices should be stifled. A voice is an extension of the heart. And if you silence your heart, you will grow cold and
Hmm.
you will be a disconnected human being. So the last thing we should do is cut each other's voices away, regardless of how drastically different someone speaks, thinks, or feels than you. My two
Absolutely.
cents.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. There,
Well, oh,
absolutely.
go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. I was just saying that you're absolutely right. That's my opinion as well. Like you can't. We don't live in a society that our America was founded on this ideal, and for a long time thrived because of it. And now a lot of what you're seeing that's happening is happening because we have reversed course, and there are people who are trying to change the cultural conditioning of our society to where you understand that you don't get to go against the narrative or you will be punished. And that's what Alex Jones is being scapegoated for. Now you have people suing Kanye West for what he said. So you've set a precedent with Alex Jones. And when someone speaks out against the narrative, the accepted narrative, they're going to make them liable because this is a way to squelch dissenting opinions. And I have a problem with that, you know?
Yeah, drastically changes the way everyone approaches everything. I myself, during the pandemic, had not said a lot of things that I thought might be useful to people who are going through similar issues that I was. You know, the whole
Yeah.
mask thing itself. It's funny. Everyone during the beginning of the pandemic was chasing boxes of masks, and I had one in my
Mhm.
house already because every flu season, if my son gets it, there's a chance he could die. He's got lung
Yeah.
issues with his cerebral palsy. Um, so there wasn't a big deal for me, but I understood the principle behind,
Right.
don't tell me what to do in general with my body. If I'm sick, I'll stay home, free
Hmm.
will. And I also understood other people being worried about everybody. So all these things, even from a neutral standpoint, I was afraid to talk
Yeah.
because I knew, my channel could come down, my Facebook could go
Yeah.
down, and that's not a place we want to be as a society.
No, that's already not a very good place.
Yeah.
Pre- President Kennedy said in 1962, he said, "We seek a free flow of information." He said, "We are not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people." He said that at a press conference in 1962. He probably rolled over in his grave in 2020.
Oh my God. Well, that's soon after he was murdered, right?
Oh, he was murdered the next. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was so it was November '63. So yeah, 1 year, one
Yeah.
year later. Yeah,
Yeah. He said a lot of things that scared a lot of people, especially
yeah.
about the CIA and about, uh,
He
what
he.
was it?
Well,
Like secret groups, secret
oh
society.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So they are repugnant, he said, and he's right. They are repugnant.
Yeah,
He
they
knew
are.
what was up. Kennedy was playing both sides, man. What a fascinating man him and his brother were. They had their own ideas, and they were willing to, when you roll around in the mud, you're going to get dirty. And the Kennedys were in Washington D.C. So, and their dad was, a criminal, a career criminal. He was also the ambassador to England, but man, they were
I did
mixed
not
up in a
know
lot of
that.
things. Yeah, Joe Kennedy was a famous bootlegger.
Oh,
Um,
yes. I thought I heard that somewhere. That's crazy.
Crazy story, the Kennedys, but they were trying to do good. The problem is, they were in a position where they had already promised to do bad.
Yeah.
It didn't
Yeah.
work out so well.
No, that's a whole dirty game in that
Yeah.
place. I hate to do this. We're getting close on time. I want to run through a few questions with you,
Sure,
get
brother.
everybody to know you a little better. The fun thing I call lightning round. I'm just going to ask you a few personal questions. If you don't want to answer them, you can pass.
Okay.
What's your favorite food?
Oh, my favorite food? Probably pizza.
Of course, that's yeah,
It-
without a
yeah,
doubt.
so good.
What's your favorite color?
That's another good question. I mean, I probably I love red and black, and probably red and black, but I don't know. I don't know. I,
That's
I
fair.
like pink too. I don't know. I like a lot of colors. I don't know if I have a favorite.
Yeah, Kalina's too. What's your favorite color? The rainbow. I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
What is your favorite song and or band?
That's a tough one. God, that's always changing. Um,
Well, what is it now?
um, I mean, I kind of like I just go through my playlist. I don't know if I have a favorite band, but like on my playlist is everything from like I was listening to Gregory Abbott this morning. That's for those of you who don't know Gregory Abbott, he's like from 1983. My mom used to listen to him all the time. It's like it's very soul. It's almost like the Temptations or the Four Tops, only 1980s. um, my son's like, "What do we listen to?" I'm like, "Your grandmother loved this song." I was trying not to get emotional listening to it. But like on my playlist is like on any given day, I'm listening to like um, you know Calvin Harris, or even a little like Wiz Khalifa, Eminem. Daft Punk is one of my favorites. I love Daft Punk. I've always loved Daft Punk. But I mean, I love to exercise, so I listen to a lot of stuff that motivates me and gets me moving.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a heck of a range. And me and Kalina were watching the Daft Punk video with the Blue Aliens
Oh
playing
yeah,
in the band with every. I can't remember the name of it. They were playing in the rock band.
yeah. One more time.
One more time. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the one. That was so good. Yeah. Um, Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And last question. Well, two questions. What's your favorite place in nature to anywhere in the world you've been to, just so you can observe the beauty of that nature?
We have this awesome cabin on a 3 mile island in on the St. Lawrence River in the Thousand Islands. It's called Carlton Island, and it's a bird sanctuary. There's all these deer on it. There actually was a Civil War fort on it as well, and there's this huge old Gatsby style mansion that's been abandoned, that's on it. That's like, I mean, some people see it and they're like, "Oh my god, it's scary," but it's just kind of like it's a throwback. It's enormous, and it's literally like right next to our cabin, which is kind of cool. If you Google Carlton Island, it'd probably be the first thing that shows up on it. But I go there every summer. I just love sitting on the porch and looking over the river. We go out on the water and fish, and it's in the summer it's beautiful. Doesn't get too hot. Um, I love that place. Probably one of my favorite places to go. Nature.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I always love it when the favorite place is somewhere close to home.
Yeah.
That's always a beautiful thing. Last question. What is your favorite childhood memory that you can think of?
My favorite childhood memory. That is a tough one. Oh man. I should have one. I'm wondering if this question comes easy to some people. I guess probably to some people. um, God, I I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I'm like I'm drawing a blank. I mean, that says a lot about my childhood, but uh,
Well, if you can't think of one either, too, that's fine. I usually do that for people as s- something tends to stick out that usually, in my experience, tends to represent something that either they didn't have a lot of in childhood, or that they did have a ton of that they really enjoyed, and sometimes, especially with crazy childhood, it can get mixed up too. Sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Like, you know, what came to mind was this when I was about 9 years old. I have an identical twin brother, and we ended up competing for just about everything from the moment we were conceived, including womb space, which is how we got our names. His name is Frank, and my name is Faust. And I'm named after my grandfather, and he's named after my uncle. They were brothers, and they were always fighting, and so we were jostling for space. And my mother made the remark to my father. She said, "There they go again, just like my father and my uncle Frank." And so I ended up being named after her father, Faust, and he got named after my uncle Frank. I was like, that set the bar really well there. Um, but I
That's
remember
so cool.
it's crazy, right? Um, we're getting along better than ever. But so I was 8, and we both entered a karate tournament. I was either 8 or 9 years old. And it was like a full contact kumite for 8-year-olds. And we had little gloves on, and it was a point system. And Frank and I both beat about 5 opponents each, and we had to fight each other for first place.
Ooh.
And my brother was traditionally, this may have been the first acting I ever did. My brother was traditionally, slightly more athletic and tougher, right? I was always faster. So I'm like, how am I gonna beat him? He was it was like just kind of like the Karate Kid. There was a 3-point thing, and he was up 2-0, and I was like, how am I gonna beat him? Like I was like, the only time I can ever beat him at anything is when I get mad at him, right? So I was like, I have to get mad at him, right? So all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I just started going, I started going like really hardcore intense, and he was just like, what the, and I scored 3 quick points, and I won this huge trophy, and he got this little second place medal, and I was so happy and so proud, and my parents were like, yeah, no one would celebrate with me because Frank was so upset, and I was like, oh man. And then Frank ended up breaking my trophy one day. He got mad at me, but
Oh.
it was a happy memory for me. I was kind of upset no one wanted to celebrate, but I was still happy about winning.
That's got to be a rough spot for a parent to be in with two kids in the
Right.
tournament against each other for first and second. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Holy shit.
there's my childhood in a nutshell.
Oh man, that's great. Well, that's
Crazy.
perfect, brother. I want to give you two an opportunity to let everybody know where they can find you, how to find you. But before that, I just want to say thank you for the good time tonight, brother. Thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy dude, and I really enjoyed our chat tonight, and I enjoy you as a person, as a friend, as a person in our community. You do huge service by bringing a lot of people forward, exposing a lot of beautiful information, and also sharing your perspective on these things that are very important in our community too. So thank you for being you, brother, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate it, bro. I love you and Kalina and you guys. I feel such a kinship with you guys ever since we got to know each other. So I appreciate you having. It's an honor to come on. I love what you're doing with the show, and it's some incredible people on. So I'm just honored to be counted among them. And dude, congratulations! Before I forget, on the Forbidden Network. That is so awesome, dude. I heard that and I was like, oh, that's amazing. I just I met Billy Carson a few months ago, and I had his business partner, and I'm pretty sure they're partners as well, Elizabeth Hoekstra on my show. But the amazing people doing great things with Forbidden Knowledge Network. So congratulations on that. That's incredible.
Thank you, brother, and we love you too. Me and Kalina absolutely adore you, and we send love to you and your family all the time.
Appreciate it, man. And so if you guys go on YouTube and you search for Far Out with Faust, I'm gonna be the only thing that comes up. We also have a website, faroutwithfaust.com, that you can check out. That it, all our shows live there as well. And I need to kind of update the site a little bit, like as far as some of the graphics go. But also every day we put out shorts, and they cover a wide range of material, everything from the secret space program to like what the most successful animal on earth is when it comes to hunting, which is the dragonfly. And we edit them really well, and they're fun, and they're all under 60 seconds. So there's always, every day we're releasing something anyway. Podcasts come out every Friday, and we also have a show we do called Believers versus Skeptics, which is I'm typically the believer, obviously, and I face off with a friend of mine, a young, I want to call him a millennial. He's a pretty young guy who's a hardcore skeptic materialist, and we talk about things like UFOs and the truth about JFK and 9/11, and we've even covered the topic of fluoride and what it's doing in the water. So for some people who are interested in some of those topics, like, "Hey, I want to know why is there fluorides in the water? Why is fluoride in the damn water?" You could check out that series. And so I'm always creating content to get people information and thinking. So check it out if you can.
Oh, your shorts are amazing too. Me and Kalina have happened upon them many times, and
Awesome.
every one you did is amazing and a really great tool to get information out a quick way. Well, thank you, brother, for being here. We appreciate your time, and everybody else. We appreciate you guys being here. Come next week with Shelley Young. She's going to be amazing, guys. If you haven't been exposed to her from Trinity Esoterics, please do. Normally I just say goodbye and I love you guys, but tonight I'm going to take you out, for those of you who might not have seen about the special course that we have coming up. Someone who was here earlier in our chat room, John Craig, who's also an amazing dude. His partner, Kama England, who's also an amazing lady, who's a channeler and a teacher. He has been helping me get this course around, an amazing guy. I'll put his link into the description too, guys. Check out the course material if it interests you. If you want to be on a 4-week course with Ardif channeling and us doing Q&As every week about the material that had just been released, check it out. I'll leave you guys with this, and I'll put the link in the chat and in the pinned comment under Faust's information. Love you guys.
Thanks,
we'll
bro.
see you next week. Thank you again, brother, for being here.
Thank you, guys.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Looking through the construct, the technical attributes of the human sexuality, the energetic mechanics of co-creation, creation, individual understanding, part of the energy fields of the human collective consciousness as a singular entity into your collective consciousness. Sexuality affects all beings